Hey everyone, this is Ian with Abstrakt Studios, and I'm going to show you how to make your cell phone video look as polished as possible. Hey everyone, I'm Ian, and I'm a video producer with Abstrakt Marketing Group. And in case you're new, we get to make really exciting videos for our clients. To do that, we use professional video equipment, from lighting to mics to cinema cameras. But the thing is, while equipment like this means you can make really high quality, professional looking videos, you can still get really good looking video out of most any phone so long as you understand how to shoot with it. While it's not going to be identical to a dedicated video camera, you can still get a pretty polished product from it. So let's dive in and learn how to get professional video out of your phone's camera. And a quick heads up, this info is based around iPhones because that's what I have, but regardless of what phone you use, this will still be useful. So first off, there's a few basics we should know about how recording video works so that we can know how to best use our phones. Specifically, there's three big factors that affect your video quality: resolution, frame rate, and shutter speed. Resolution is the number of individual pixels being recorded in a video. The more pixels you have, the more detail there is. The most common resolution these days is 1080p or Full HD video. 4K video, also known as Ultra HD, is also becoming more popular and has 4 times the resolution of 1080p video. When it comes to recording, most phones are capable of shooting 4K video, but the catch is most video is still watched in 1080p. The main benefit to shooting in 4K is if you have a specific need to upload a 4K video, or if you want more flexibility for editing the footage later on. For example, I'm shooting this in 4K so I can do things like digitally zooming in, but the final product you're watching is in 1080p. And since 4K footage takes a lot more processing power to edit anyway, you'll usually be just fine recording in 1080p. Up next is frame rate. This is just how many individual frames are being played per second to give the illusion of motion in a video. Traditionally, movies have always been shot at 24 frames per second, or FPS for short, which was a standard setback when everything was shot on film. It was originally chosen to save money by using less film per shot, but now 24 frames per second is synonymous with a cinematic look. When it comes to TV and online content, 30 frames per second is much more common. There's a whole history as to why 30 frames per second became a thing in the first place, but that's its own story for another time. A lot of cameras can also shoot 60 frames per second and higher, but this is really only used for slow motion, and most content isn't really going to be played back at 60 frames per second. As far as recording your video goes, you can honestly shoot in 24 or 30 frames per second, and it won't make too big of a difference. The most important thing is that you don't want to mix frame rates, because if you start throwing 24 and 30 frames per second clips right next to each other in the same video, one of them is going to end up looking choppy. I don't make the rules, it's just the way it is. Now third, and possibly most important, let's talk about shutter speed. In short, this is the amount of time that your camera takes to expose each frame of your video. The reason this is significant is because it's what allows motion blur in your video, which helps playback look smoother and more natural to the human eye. Shutter speed is usually represented in fractions of a second, like 1/60th of a second. And as a general rule of thumb, you want your shutter speed to be roughly double whatever your frame rate is. So for example, if you're going to shoot a video at 30 frames per second, you'd want your shutter speed to be 1/60th. If your shutter speed is too high, it'll leave your video looking really choppy and unnatural, which is especially noticeable if you have a lot of movement going on in your shot. This is where it gets a little tricky on phones because they're constantly automatically adjusting settings to keep everything the right brightness. And one of the things it'll automatically adjust first is your shutter speed. If we want to keep a locked shutter speed, you're likely going to need a third-party camera app that gives you full manual control. There are a lot on the market, but for both Android and iOS, one popular option is Filmic Pro. Manual apps allow you to control all the settings on your camera, so you can make sure your brightness, focus, color, and everything else stays consistent between all your shots. So now that we know what settings to adjust, let's get down to brass tacks and set up our shot. First, you're going to need a way to secure your phone. Handheld shots are fine on occasion, but by locking the phone in place somewhere, we'll avoid a lot of shakiness that comes with hand holding the phone. Tripods work great, but if that's not an option, Even propping your phone up somewhere steady is fine. Next, we need to frame our shot. For this shot, I have myself in frame talking to the camera. We want the camera to be at an appropriate height, and since I'm talking into the camera, we want to have my eye line sit at about 2/3 of the way up in the shot. This is known as the rule of thirds. If you imagine a tic-tac-toe grid over your frame, you'll want to line your subject up along one of those lines. By framing my eyes on the top line, instead of straight in the middle, it gives a much more natural and definitely a more polished feel. A lot of cameras even offer the option to put a grid on your screen, so it's easy to check your framing. We'll also want to make sure we're not cutting anything off in our frame like the top of my head, and importantly, we'll want to make sure we have good lighting. Since we're filming with a phone, odds are we're not looking to invest a bunch of money into lighting equipment, but you'll mostly just want to make sure you're in a well-lit room or around a window, and you'll also want to double check that you don't have any harsh shadows going across your face. I would also strongly recommend using the main camera on your phone instead of the selfie camera if at all possible. While you won't be able to see yourself on screen and it'll be a little less convenient, you're going to get a higher quality image in almost every way. So if you can deal with not watching yourself and trust that you're in frame, highly recommend using the back camera. We'll also want to check our background. The further we can get away from whatever's behind us, the more background blur we'll be able to have, which will help you stand out from the background. You'll want to check out for any distractions in the background too. Flashing lights, lots of movement, or even just badly placed objects can distract the audience away from your subject and onto the things you don't want them to see. And one other way you can boost the quality of your video is by having good audio. While audio straight from your phone will do in a pinch, ideally you'll want to have some sort of external mic. You could check out another recent video we made here where I go more in depth on how to record good audio and the difference that it makes in your video. Now that we've adjusted our camera settings and we can make sure we're in an ideal filming conditions, you're going to notice a big difference between a normal video clip and a well thought out shot. Also, just one last piece of advice. Done is better than perfect. In a perfect world, every single video will look and sound amazing, but it's more important to see your ideas through to completion than to make sure every single one is as perfect as it could be. If you're obsessing over perfection but you're never finishing anything, then you haven't even gained any progress. The more you finish, the better you'll be, and then every finish will build on the last one. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today, but if you need any help or have any questions, leave a comment below. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe for more in the future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.